Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming through to Delicious Pizza here on Sunset Boulevard in beautiful Hollywood, Los Angeles, California. We appreciate it. Bill and I have known each other for about a decade or maybe a little more now, and we appreciate you guys coming out to support our books. They both are recently out, and we're very excited to be able to talk and interview each other and discuss them, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. But as I'm sure everyone here knows, Bill is a legendary actor, director, writer, and has a beautiful foundation as well, the D.O.C Media Foundation, and has done a lot of charitable work in California and throughout the world, and is a acclaimed, award-winning everything. So let's welcome Bill Duke.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Mr. Soren Baker, who is a pioneer in terms of not only the rap world, but the music world, and with his book, but also in terms of what he has done and continues to do, is to take it from the titles to the humanity of the people who create the music, which is not easy to do, but he's done it for years, and so could we give him a little love?
Thank you, Bill. And with Bill's book, and we have copies here on sale in case you don't have it yet, My 40-Year Career on Screen and Behind the Camera. It's an amazing read, and we're going to talk a lot about that tonight, and talk a little bit about my book as well, The History of Gangster Rap. And with Bill, your book traces a lot of your biographical information, but then also, as the title suggests, also gets into a lot of the work that you did and continue to do in Hollywood. For those who need to check out Black Lightning, if you haven't been watching that on the CW, Bill's got a prominent role in there. And one of the things I remember reading about in your book, My 40-Year Career on Screen and Behind the Camera, is talking about, I believe it was your cousin Ernest that helped you with acting early on and learning the importance of listening as part of acting. So I think for a lot of people out there that are watching film, television, etc., or they're interested in getting into it, explain why it's so important to listen and how listening has helped you develop your skills as an actor and as a director.
Well, thank you for that. Silence, as you all know, is a very powerful thing. Like in music, for example, there is no music without rests, because if it's a notes, it's just noise. But the rests are the things that define the music. And with acting, for example, it's not what you say on screen, but what you respond to. And that's the people who you're talking to or not. And people watch not only what you say, but how you respond to what someone else is saying. And sometimes it's difficult to do that because as actors, a lot of actors just want to talk. But that's not what acting really is. Acting, and the fact that they call it acting, I don't think we should call it acting, because it's not pretending or acting. It's being. It's becoming the thing that the director and the writer have asked you to be in terms of the character. And when I teach acting, I relate it to falling into darkness backward. Any creative person in this room that's written, sang a song or acted or directed or whatever, after you have all the lines memorized, if you just do the lines when you get on screen, you're not doing it. You don't know how it's going to end up. All you do is dive into it. And so that's why silence and listening are important, because you're not just waiting to say your next line. You're responding to the person or people who are on screen with you and responding to the truth of that.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because another thing that you talk about in your book, is the alchemy aspect of it, being able to take different parts of things and make something new, not only as an actor, but obviously the black experience in America. So for you, how did you look at those two realities to impact yourself as a person and as a creative individual?
Well, alchemy, according to the Bible, Jesus was the first alchemist. He turned water into wine. But poor people, black and white, Hispanic or whatever, are alchemists too, because many of us came up starving, and we took the guts of pigs and turned them into chitlins. Now, those are guts. Turned them into chitlins because we didn't get nothing else, right? When they cut the pig's feet off, we turned them into pig's feet. So the brilliance of a suffering people is amazing to me, because out of it comes all kinds of things: art, music, recipes, whatever, because either you survive or you don't. And if you want to survive, you dig down deep into something sometimes you don't even understand. You just make it happen. So in terms of you, one of the things that I love about what you've done and you continue to do is a lot of people see gangster rappers as these gangster thug, non-thinking, kind of criminal-minded people. And with all of the work that you've done over the years, you've brought a humanity to that. What inspired you, and what makes you continue to do that?
Well, I'd have to give a lot of credit of that to my parents, because I didn't see any prejudice or racism or anything in my house. So I didn't learn that until I left my house. So once I was exposed to that, and I grew up in Maryland, and where I grew up was very racially and economically diverse. So once I started understanding how the isms worked, it was very perplexing to me, and I had to ask my parents why these things were happening, and I didn't understand it because it didn't make sense. And some of my neighbors were black, my best friends were black, and everybody was just getting along. And then I realized that wasn't how most people looked at things. And that was very discouraging to me, and was also counter to what my family had taught me. So then a few years later, once I got to be 10 and got into rap, and then a few years later when rap got a lot more political, then I started. Obviously, I'm not black, so I couldn't identify with it as a black man or a black woman, but I could identify with the disappointment, the anger, how it's not fair, how the system is set up. And that's where I think it really I connected with the music, because I was like, the artists are addressing things that are going on in society that by and large the media was ignoring. And then on top of that, they're articulating it in a way that I thought was very powerful, insightful, and, on top of all that, it was very entertaining. I enjoyed the music, the sonics of it, the passion of it. And when I realized that I wanted, being in Maryland, I was like, I got to figure out how to be involved in this, because my parents were both teachers. We had no connection to the music industry, and there's no music industry in Maryland. So I developed a skill in writing. And through that, I was able to talk to the artists and get to the heart of what made them create their art and why they did it. And all the questions I was asking my parents, I could then ask the Schoolie D's, the Ice T's, the Ice Cubes, and so on till today, ask them how and why they feel the way that they do based on their realities. And that's something that's always been very important to me, because I think in general our media and our society just has, obviously black people in America are second-class citizens and has been treated that way since they've been brought here. And I've always tried to show, like, there's intelligence and all this power that comes from the music and the people, and I wanted to do something to help raise awareness and help promote that.
I know this is a hard question, but from the time that it started to this day, who are in your opinion, the most important, powerful figures in that industry that have impacted and continue to impact, and why? Just the top three, would say.
Top three? Well, I think if we look at the people on the cover of my book, The History of Gangster Rap, I'd say there's like a Mount Rushmore of gangster rap, and those guys in a lot of ways represent it. But if we use three, let's see. Well, definitely I think Dr. Dre is immensely influential because he's gotten respect as a producer and as an artist and as a talent scout, so many levels to where he's brought out generations of artists in a way that I'm very confident off the top of my head no one else in rap history has done. If you look at, and I talk about this extensively in my book, The History of Gangster Rap, every time Dr. Dre went to a new situation, it was more popular than the one that he did before, and the one he did before everyone thought had changed rap and was the biggest thing ever. You start with the World Class Wrecking Crew, which was big for what it was, but then he gets to Ruthless Records and has all the success with Eazy-E, NWA, D.O.C, Michelle A, etc. And everybody's like, man, this is the biggest thing. NWA is huge, and he does all that. But then when he leaves there, he goes to Death Row. And when he goes to Death Row, Dr. Dre, The Chronic, and Snoop Dogg Doggy Style are bigger than anything he did at Ruthless. And we had just thought that NWA was the biggest thing that could ever be in rap. And then after he leaves Death Row and does Aftermath, then he brings out, himself with the 2001 album, but then he also brings out Eminem, who's the best-selling rap artist in rap history. So that's hugely influential. And obviously got to give a shout out to Bill for recognizing Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg's talent for Deep Cover, because that was their introduction to the world by being on the title track of the film that Bill directed, Deep Cover. So thank you for that, Bill. Because that changed, the course of rap history too, because Snoop, as I detail and discuss in my book, was the first artist in music history to have his first album debut at #1. That had never been done before, and Snoop made that happen. I'd say another person that is hugely influential would be Ice Cube, in the sense that his imagery, I'd say Eazy-E was the defining gangster rap image, but because Eazy-E passed away, obviously, he didn't have as long to see how his career would evolve. But Ice Cube had the Jerry curl, the Raiders hat, the Lokes, the chain, and then has evolved into so much with his writing, directing, producing, acting, etc. And that, he has generations of fans with his Are We There Yet series. He's got his franchises with Ride Along and Barbershop, and then he's got his basketball league now with the Big Three. So that's a phenomenal influence that stretches far beyond rap, and it's astonishing to think. And I'd have to say, going beyond that, it would probably be Will Smith for some of the same reasons. Yeah. Because Will Smith, the irony is that I think when people think about rap, they don't understand that the people who actually say something in their raps tend to be the most popular. And Will Smith was always dismissed with Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince because of their comedic tides or what have you, but at the same time, they were selling tons of records, were hugely influential, and they also made rap palatable not only to the white audience, but they gave something that parents could listen to with their kids, and that was respected. Like the Brand New Funk song, if you remember that from back in the day, that was on their He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper album, which came out in '88, and that was a song that, you know, Snoop sampled that song later, and it's just hugely influential. And then, of course, Will Smith is one of the biggest box office stars in Hollywood history of anyone. And he also has the franchises, and then he still continues to do music. And I think, even though it's clearly not gangster rap by any means, he just showed another dimension of rap, did it at the highest level, and then was able to branch out and create so many different things with Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and then subsequently with his film career. So
I'm surprised you didn't mention one of my favorite people, and I think maybe the youngsters don't know this name, but KRS-One.
Well, we're talking
One of my
about
favorites.
overall influence on everything. KRS-One to me is the second best rapper of all time.
Who's the first?
I think it's LL Cool J. Yeah. It's LL and then KRS-One. Those are the top two, in my opinion. KRS-One, I mentioned him and discussed him with Boogie Down Productions in my book, The History of Gangster Rap, because their first album, Criminal Minded, it was their only album that they did as a duo with Scott LaRock, because he was killed soon after it was released and while they were getting to make their second record. But you know, the first album, they're on the cover with guns and a strap, a magazine, and hand grenades and stuff, and they called it Criminal Minded. They have the 9mm song. So it's an early example of gangster rap. But then when Scott LaRock, the producer, DJ, and quasi-rapper of the duo, once he was killed, KRS-One moved away from that. And I think that was from talking to KRS-One several times over the years and getting his perspective. And if you go back and listen, Criminal Minded is more of Scott LaRock's persona, the gangster rap side of it, and then the poetry type songs are more of the KRS-One, and that's why you see that dichotomy on the record, whereas there's the super ho, then there's all this confrontational, violent stuff, as opposed to what we later knew Boogie Down Productions to be, which KRS-One is phenomenal. But because of KRS-One's political stance, he didn't continue to get the acclaim that I think a lot of other rappers do, because they don't focus so much on what's going on in society, which segues nicely into something in your book, Bill, because you know, it's part memoir, part biography, but also has a lot to do with what was going on in society. And I think it's very important for people to read, because you discuss, one of my favorite passages in the book is where you discuss your relationship and your friendship and your admiration for Dick Gregory. And for those that are in the audience that aren't familiar with him, please do yourself a favor and look up his work, which is vast and very significant and important. But for you, Bill, I'd like for you to explain why Dick Gregory was such an influential and important person in your life.
Well, you know, I came up in a time of segregation. And when I say segregation, it was a very, very difficult time. My sister and I were, when we were 7 and 8, coming from church, walking toward our house. Across the street from the church was a gas station, and these 3 white bikers were at the gas station in Poughkeepsie, New York. This young lady right here with the camera, she's from Poughkeepsie also.
No, Bruce Lawrence.
Oh, grandfather's from Poughkeepsie, I'm sorry. Okay, but anyway, and they told us, hey, you little niggers. And when we heard that, we started running, and they chased us. And they chased us down, and they started beating me, and badly. And I told my sister to run, but she didn't. She stayed and screamed. And when they beat me really bad, they held my head up, and they said, nigga, Next time we tell you to stop, you better stop. So my sister and I ran home, and when my father heard what happened, he got his gun, got in his car, went to that gas station, and asked the owner where'd they go. And he said, up Main Street. And we drove back and forth on Main Street for almost an hour. And we think we saw the bikers, but we never told my father, because he would have killed him. That would have meant the end of his life. So it was that kind of time. Dick Gregory came even before that, where he was in the South and he saw the lynchings, and what they used to call nigger barbecues, where they used to actually put us on spits and roast us alive. We'd be screaming, and our body parts would fall into ash. And there's a book called Without Sanctuary that shows pictures of this, where pieces of our bodies would be held up and hundreds of people would be laughing and smiling, because we were not considered all human, only 3/4 human, and 1/4 ape and monkeys. And Dick was a comedian, so in a strange kind of way, he made us laugh by telling the truth. And that's the deepest kind of laughter. He just described the reality of those times and how, to a certain extent, it still existed today. But he made you laugh and give you insight in terms of yourself and society.
Well, I think, too, that's interesting you say that, because another part in your book that, it's interesting. I've known Bill for more than a decade, so some of these stories I knew, but one that I didn't know that ties into what you were just saying is how, when you were in Italy, the story about the lady that came up to you, because you talk about the laughter of the ridiculousness of the incident, but then also the pain of the reality of what happened. So I want you to explain this story to people, because when I read it, it was staggering.
Okay, in the late 70s, early 80s, I was in a play called Slave Ship, and we did an international tour. And one of the places, the first place we went was to Italy, to Rome. And we'd be in the hotel, and we'd be going to these different interviews and stuff. And this older Italian lady used to follow us, and she was like frightened, but she would get behind us and follow us. So after the third time, our tour guide, we said, who is she and why is she doing that? So she went up to the lady and said, why are you following them? And she spoke in Italian. Why are you following them? What's the problem? And the lady started shaking and said, pointing. And the tour guide came back to us laughing and said, you're not going to believe this, but she was looking for your tails. Because she had been told that black people were part human and part monkeys. So she was looking for our tails, and she kept looking and didn't see them, but she knew that one day she'd see them, and so she kept, but she never followed us after that, so.
Thankfully. But that's, but that's the type of thing that I think is so striking about Bill's book, is because there's a lot of societal, personal, family tragedy that Bill discusses, but then it's also obviously how you were able to overcome this. And that's I think the power of Bill's book, and one of the main reasons I would recommend it for everyone to make sure to get it, because a lot of things that people may not know about Bill, and he talks about this in the book, is that when you were begging, or when Bill was actually begging, and a woman came up to him and told him, does your mama know you're doing this? And that was really powerful, because people always look at someone as successful as yourself and think that you've always been successful, but they don't, unless they read or know you well. And we've had these type of talks over the last decade plus, but it's not always like that.
Well, you know, this is an industry of rejection. And people tell you to get over it. But if you're rejected, let's say in a month, 12 times, every time we go for an audition, and everybody says, no, 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 I don't care what anybody says. At some point, you take it personally. And when you take it personally, it causes pain. And you'll do anything you can to get rid of that pain. And my solution was drugs and alcohol. It wasn't smart or good, but it was something that took me to the bottom. But through the grace of God, I was able to get through it. And in the book, I talk about that aspect of survival. But I also talk about the business of the industry. And this industry not only has changed, but continues to change every day. We've gone from film and television to media, augmented reality, virtual reality, cell phone apps, etc. And all those jobs behind the scenes that were not there when I existed give you guys an opportunity that we never had. And I think you have to educate yourself in terms of, okay, you want to be an actor? Cool. But instead of waiting to be discovered, you can discover yourself. I just acted in a film with Steven Soderbergh. It's on Netflix now, and it's called High Flying Bird. It's about the politics of basketball. The entire feature film we shot in New York. Soderbergh shot the entire film in 2 weeks with 5 iPhones. Not 5 cameras, 5 iPhones. There were 7 pluses. And they changed the lenses, of course. And when they did the dolly shots, they rolled them around in the wheelchair. Nothing is stopping you now. Nothing.
Except ourselves.
Well, that's a whole different story. But question for you. The music industry is changing. In terms of gangster rap to what you're hearing today, how has it changed, and what are your feelings about that?
Well, I think one of the main changes with gangster rap versus what it was when I was a kid growing up is that in the early stages, the level of political commentary, social commentary, and actual reflection, pain, discussion, ramifications, negative outcome of being a gang member, of being around drugs, around being around violence, around having a broken family, that was much more prominent in the music, I would say, starting with Schoolie D, moving on up through probably the early 1990s. Once the explosion of gangster rap came, I'd say the super explosion of it with Death Row, we started moving more and more away from that, even though it still existed throughout the history of the music. But I think now what we see is that the artist today, and I think Vince Staples is the best of this generation that delivers what would be considered gangster rap, but people like Vince Staples and then the other artists that do a good job of infusing some of the elements of what the creators and the pioneers and the trailblazers did are the ones that are the best artists. But now I think because the music has been around so long and you can only hear F that, B that, and that so many times to where we're numb to hearing those in a lot of ways. So it's not as impactful, just the profanity aspect of it. And because of that, now we're drowning in a lot of artists trying to be tough but not offering any reasons why. We've lost, I think, in general terms, a lot of the social commentary aspect of it, other than the super elite artists, including some of the ones I've mentioned. And then when we see someone like a YG do a song that has social commentary, whether it's the FDT song or Blacks and Browns, etc. Those songs to me are some of his better songs because we're seeing a different side of his personality, and he's digging more into how he thinks and what he feels about society today.
For the artists in this room now, who are into music, etc., we went from tapes to CDs. CDs are dead. Where do you see it going in the next 10 years? In other words, for a person who wants to get into the music business, what's stopping them? In other words, what direction would you give them?
Well, this is, I'd say, a lot of people. There are two sets of people that understand. There's one set of people that don't understand what I'm about to say and one that does. The main thing, if you're going to be an artist that's trying to get into the music industry now, the main thing to realize is that your music is a loss leader. You're not in it to sell music to make money off the music itself. You have to generate your living, your income, and your livelihood off of everything that surrounds the music. Your merchandise, your touring, licensing, getting your stuff out there in different ways rather than someone buying a physical copy, buying a download. Because as people that have read up on streaming, the money is pitiful in streaming. And then because of streaming, most people aren't buying downloads anymore. So generating money, the main way to do that is through licensing. So getting your song in a film, getting your song on a television show, getting your song in a commercial. But of course, most of that stuff goes to people that are established. Unless you're someone like Bill Duke who can tell that deep cover by Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, it's going to be big. But that's the challenge of trying to, earn a living in the modern music industry. You have to separate your emotion as an artist and approach it as a career that encompasses so many different things beyond just selling the music and trying to get money off of that. Because that's going to be hard to sustain yourself on unless you're the 1% of the 1%. It's very difficult to make that happen. And tied into that for you, Bill, you've overcome a lot in your life, and you had mentioned drugs and alcohol, rejection, different things that were some of the negative things that had you spiraling. I wanted you to talk about the power of faith, the power of transcendental meditation that you do, the power of how did you figure out to believe in yourself in a way that your parents didn't as far as acting. They believed in you, but they didn't believe in your acting. How did you overcome that? What happened to you to where you believed in yourself to be able to sustain yourself?
Well, when I was coming up, you didn't choose your career. Your parents told you what you were going to be and do. And you're not going to be stupid. You're going to make some money and get an education, because my father and mother had second and third grade educations, but they worked. My father worked 3 jobs, and my mother worked 2 jobs. They worked sometimes 7 days a week. They never took welfare or anything because they were very proud people, etc. And my sister and I saw that. I was supposed to be a doctor because they told me doctors make money, so I took these pre-med courses, cutting up cats and frogs and all kinds of stuff in the veins, and that wasn't for me. And so I was a very shy kid, and so I used to write a journal. And they said, we like to write, become a teacher because teachers make money. I got a scholarship to Boston University, and I had fallen asleep in my Chaucer class for the 3rd time. I don't know if you've read Chaucer or not, but it's not, anyway. And I got kicked out of the class. And so my friend Israel Hicks said, you always talk about that acting thing. Lloyd Richards, who was the first black director on Broadway to do The Raising of the Sun, was at BU at that time. I went up, I auditioned, And I'm glad there wasn't YouTube because the next semester I was in tights dancing across a ballet floor. I'm glad those pictures don't exist.
We all are.
But Lloyd went to NYU. I followed him there. Gave me my first job out here. He told me to stay, and my career started taking off a little bit. But you have your downsides, you know. You have your downs, and as I said, the rejection sometimes just punch, punch, punch. So I ended up, taking drugs, etc. But transcendental meditation saved my life. And a lady called Aida Tengamana, a friend of mine at the time, said, "Bill, you're sinking really low. Try meditation." I said, "Get away from that hippie stuff." And I get lower, and she said, "You can't got much further to go down." So I tried she taught me the meditation. In the first 2 weeks I meditated but kept taking drugs. She said to me, "Okay, I'll make a deal with you. If you meditate for 4 weeks and don't take any drugs, and you still want drugs, I'll buy you anything you want." I said, "Bet." So I'm thinking, well, it's not going to work. First week, second week I started feeling something. Third and fourth week, I haven't touched a drug since. So meditation, I meditate every day, sometimes twice a day. Centers me, takes the stress away, gives me focus, and also challenges my mind. Because I was told when I was young, at a certain age, when you're older, you know everything. Not true. Not true. The thing is, you should never stop asking questions. You should always question yourself, because that's the only way you grow. So wisdom is self-examination. I went to a therapist once, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. I had broken up with this girl, and it was so painful. I had to go to therapy and get over it and stuff, and describing how horrible she was and blah, 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 blah. And so I'm talking for at least a good 12, 15 minutes. And the therapist says to me, "Billy, you finished?" I said, "Yeah, man, I'm finished." He said, "Billy, you ever think about investing in a roll of toilet paper?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Investing in a roll of toilet paper." I said, "What is it? What the hell is that supposed to mean?" He says, "Well, you're really good at describing how bad she smells. But if you ever took a piece of toilet paper, reached back and wiped your own emotional butt and sniffed it, you never talk about nobody again." So I said to him, "Am I paying for this?" He said, "Yeah." And so those kinds of things, I think, have taught me a lot about life.
And I think that that's one of the great themes in your book, is that how revealing you are and unafraid to show your own shortcomings at times, and your ability to kind of navigate and address them in an emotional way in your book. And that's something that you talk about also in the book that you did not get from your father in particular. So how did you learn, not seeing that with your father, to be able to tap into that yourself and to be able to use that for your personal life, which also you discuss in details was very difficult for you to do, but then also moving into a form of expression with cinema and with television?
Well, either you survive or you don't. I mean, I know that sounds cold-blooded, but there are points in your life where you come to a point where you care enough about yourself that you do what you got to do to really gain your self-respect and your life, no matter what society says. I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not. It is. If everybody's telling you you're too tall, you're too black, you're too stupid, you're too dangerous, you're too whatever, at some point you start thinking, well, maybe I am, maybe I'm. But my mother and father said something to my sister and I that in those hard times I remembered. And this is when we were just little children. And they said, always remember, you're no better than anybody else, but nobody's better than you. And once you really digest that in those difficult times, it helps bring you through things, you know? So I'm not suggesting it's easy because it's not, but I am saying we have to begin to care about ourselves. You know, they say when you're going through a plane crash, first thing you do is put the mask on yourself. So we're not going to go much further. I'm going to ask them the question, but you like jokes? Can I tell them a joke?
Go for it.
And with us two sitting here, this is an appropriate joke, okay?
And Bill's got some good ones. I'm interested to see which one this is.
A little black boy is helping his mother bake a cake. And he gets white flour all over his entire body, his face and everything. He says to a mother, hey, mommy, what, baby? Look, I'm a little white boy. Hits him on his butt. He said, what did I do? Go tell your father what you just said. Go tell your father. Goes to his father and says, Daddy, look. What, baby? I'm a little white boy. Boom, hits him on his butt. What did I do? Just go to your grandmother. Just tell her what you just. Goes to his grandmother's room and says, Grandma, yeah, baby. Just say it. I'm a little white boy. Boom, hits him on his butt. He goes back to his mother. His mother said, what did you just learn? What lesson did you just learn? Little boy says, what I learned was, I only been white for 5 minutes and I hate you black people already. I'm sorry. He made me do it, okay? I apologize, okay?
So with that, let's open up the floor to some questions, if anyone has any. Yes, sir.
What was your favorite movie role?
My favorite movie role? I would say Predator, because we were in the jungles of Puerto Vallarta for a long time. Do you know this? Do you know the Predator you saw was not the original Predator? You know that, right? You don't know this story?
It's in his book. Please pick up a copy. He talks about it in detail.
Yeah, the original Predator was a much smaller character with these laser guns coming out of his body and stuff. And
don't tell him who it was, though.
Okay.
Don't tell him who
Okay.
it was. You got to read the
Read
book
the
for
book.
that. It's amazing who the original Predator was.
I have a question.
Continue.
I'm sorry, I'm way up here. I'm live in 120 countries, and one of the fans had a question for you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so Blue Eyes here on tag says, how long did it take you to get real results out of your acting career?
Say what? Results. I could say a long time. It's years and years and years. You know, you have to be persistent and consistent and grow. And I was lucky enough to have some great acting teachers also at NYU and Boston University. So it's about survival. It's about survival.
And one thing I think would be interesting, an interesting story, even though the hero of your joke had a problem with black people, I think it's interesting the story that you tell in your book about the gentleman and the origin story of him paying for your college so that you could sustain yourself and remain in school as an actor.
I came up during a time where, you know, I said I was beaten as a child, and when I was in kindergarten, my first day, I was called a little nigger, and I went into the bathroom and tried to wipe the black off my skin with Babo bleach and stuff, and I grew up as a racist, to be honest with you. I know Spike Lee says black folks can't be racist, but we can, and we are sometimes, even in our own culture, colorism, making light skin better than dark skin, and all that madness that we do. But it's like Well, I forgot the question.
How you were able to continue your collegiate career?
It's at some point you have to embrace yourself. I know it sounds corny, but at some point you have to embrace yourself, and you have to believe in yourself. And I can't tell you there's a formula or whatever it is, but I like great quotes, and I found some that have carried me through my life. Example, your opinion of me is your business, ain't got nothing to do with me.
But Bill, this is what I was trying to get at. The story you tell in the book of the gentleman that you...
Oh, yes. So I came up as a racist, and I did not like white folks at all because of what I'd gone through. And two things happened that were in the book. You'll see that were confusing to me. I wrote a journal because I have dyslexia. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a very... I couldn't read well. In the reading classes, there were 3 categories: the Eagles, who were the best readers, and then the Bears, who were the second best, and then my category was the donkeys. And they made you a donkey because they wanted to aspire to be an eagle, but once you're a donkey, you're a donkey. And so I read in the journal, and I used to write in my English class in high school, and my English teacher, Miss Walker, told me to stop 3 times. And then when she's a white lady, and the 4th time, she took my journal, told me to leave the class. Kept going to the class. At the last class of the semester, I was leaving the room, and I hated her, and she said, "Duke, come back here and sit down." Came back and sit down. She went in her desk and pulled out 2 books. One of my journals, she gave it back to me. And then she had entered my poems in a national poetry contest, and I won a prize. And I looked at her, I said, wait a minute, something's wrong here. This is a white lady doing this, why? And the second thing that happened, I graduated from Dutch Community College in Poughkeepsie. I got a scholarship, Martin Luther King scholarship, to Boston University. But I couldn't pay for my room and board, so I decided to come back to Poughkeepsie, and I was going to work for a couple of years and go back to BU. I went back to Dutchess to visit some friends of mine, and the president, Dr. Hall, who was he was in the Navy, an admiral, strict guy, nobody liked him, and white male. I'm walking down the hall, and I'm leaving, and he says, "Duke, come here." I said, "Okay," go to his office. And he says, "I hear you're going to leave BU." I said, "Yeah, well, I'm going to come back to Poughkeepsie." And he says, "No, you're not." He reaches into his vest pocket, pulls out an envelope. He says, "Open it." I opened it. It was a check that paid for all of my room and board for 3 years. That confused me too. There's a white man doing this, so something wrong with this, right?
And tell the people how you would refer to him and talked about him to your parents, especially.
After, you mean? No, before. Oh, I told him he was a horrible this and horrible that and blah, blah, blah. But what it forces you to do is to see people's humanity. Like right now, we're being divided in this country a lot, And I'm simply saying, man, everybody goes to the bathroom, everybody bleeds red blood. If I punch you in the face, you punch me, I feel pain. We all have difficult times. And this division thing is insane to me. I'm not going to get deep into it, but anyway, that's my opinion.
Go ahead.
Another question, gentlemen.
Go for it. Soren, I apologize if I was just calling you Ad Rock. I remember the talk show with Xzibit. Yeah.
Open Bar Radio.
Right.
There you go.
I couldn't remember. I didn't know if you were a black man or white. I didn't know. Bill tells me that. I didn't know. So I apologize. It didn't hit me. Soren Baker, I apologize. Oh, good. And would you speak, this question is for you. A lot of what you said about gangster rap is, pretty much right on. 2 words stuck out for me. Isms and obviously. So I asked my wife what I should ask you, what question I should ask you. She said, don't ask him that one. Well, that's what I'm going to ask you.
What's the question?
You obviously, you use the word obviously when you're speaking about it. We black people are second class citizens.
What's the question?
That is the question. Do you obviously believe that?
Oh, I was saying they're treated as such, is what I'm saying. So I don't think anyone could honestly say that black people have been treated equally in the United States. So what I was saying is that bothered me because my neighbors, the Joneses, were black, and we did a lot of stuff with them. And we came over to our house, we went to their house, went to baseball games with them, 4th of July with them, saw fireworks. So there was nothing different about that. And that really struck with me because when I would go out and see how things were, or I would see the news, or I'd read the newspaper, or I would hear my classmates, some of my white classmates talk, I could tell that how my parents taught me was not how other people were being taught. And then I learned the racism and all those different things, and it made me realize that, you know, a lot of people that in America, blacks are treated as second-class citizens, and like Bill said, the 3/5 of a man. Like, when I learned that, that just blew my mind because Mrs. Jones would always tell people that I was her son, and she was a black woman, and she, other than my parents, probably took care of me more than anyone else. So she loved me, and she's a black woman. Mr. Jones was a black man, and their children loved me, and, you know, I would talk with their son Eric about rap all the time, like for hours, and then their relatives that lived in the area too. So it was just always shocking to me because I didn't see that in my house, and I didn't see it among my family, my other family members. So that's I hope that makes better sense. All right, any other questions?
I have so many questions, but I just want to ask you a simple question. And it could be a stupid question, but why name the title of your book, The History of Gangster Rap, instead of Gangsta?
All right, the question is, why did I call it the history of gangster rap instead of the history of gangsta rap? Well, I did that very deliberately because first of all, I don't talk like that. So for me, it would have been disingenuous for me to say gangsta because that's not how I talk. And since I was writing the book, if I quote someone that talks that way, I quote them, and that's their words. But how I talk and how I write is more grammatically proper word, all that type of stuff. And a lot of artists clearly don't do that. Furthermore, I also wanted to do it because, and I talk about this in my book, The History of Gangster Rap, the term gangster rap was created by the media. The artists didn't create that. I talked to MC Ren from NWA about that. I talked to DJ Quick about that. I talked to CJ Mack about that. I talked to Cormega about that. And I talked to Paris about that. Since it was a media-created term, I also wanted to make a point to show, like, it's gangster, but it's because of what the media was doing, and the white media that coined the term called it gangster rap. The rappers themselves did not like the term. They didn't embrace the term until much later, and they made a point to say, before the gangster rap was coined, they referred to themselves as street poets, street reporters, reality rap, all those types of things, none of which the word gangster is not in there. And so for those reasons, I did it the way that I ended up doing with the gangster. All right, next question. We got one in the, make sure to spread it, but we got you next. Mike, you have a question.
This message is for Bill. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
First time I think
Leon.
You're Richard Gere's pimp, right? And I'm a big Paul Schrader fan as well. I'm just curious if you have any stories from that role. Was that an important role in your acting career as far as taking you to another level? And anything interesting about that, making that movie, I would love to hear.
Paul Schrader is one of my favorite directors up until this day. I don't know if you ever saw the film that he directed with Richard Pryor and Yaphet Kotto, Blue Collar. It's one of the most, they didn't get the credit they deserve, but one of the, so working with him was wonderful. Richard Gere is a professional, humble, and, you know, he's the kind of actor that he comes to the set as the person that he's playing. And so that encouraged me also. I'd never experienced that before. So that was the role I loved. I didn't love the fact that he pushed me off the balcony, but I love the depth of the role.
A precursor to Juice.
Yes. And the insight into that real world which existed at that time. You know, he was a pimp, but that was the business of that particular time. A lot of people were going through that thing. So I really enjoyed being in that.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I have one coming out of Philadelphia from Shay. She said, this is directed at Phil. What was the hardest thing that you had to endure in your career? And then I have another one from Texas. What is the hardest thing you had to endure in your whole career?
Well, I can give you a couple of examples, you know. I was one of the first black directors in a lot of things, you know. My friend Carl Gilliard is here, and he knows the history too, but it's like I was the first black director on Dallas. And I drove up to the gate in my car. I roll the window down, and the security guard looks at my face and says, "Who are you delivering for?" I wanted to say, "I'm about to deliver a can of whip ass to you," but I didn't say that because I would have been the angry black man, and you can't trust him because his emotions. But instead, after a moment, I said, "I'm delivering my talent as the first black director on Dallas. Please open the gate." The most rewarding thing was the look on his face. I can see that right now. Another difficult thing I faced was I was directing Falcon Crest, and we were in a restaurant, and in the back of the restaurant, we were shooting there in daytime, but they were preparing for the dinners in the back, the work, and every time I said action, there'd be noise, and I said to my first AD, "Hey man, it's the third time I've had to cut. You got to keep those guys quiet in the back." And in front of the cast and the crew, he looks at me and he says, "If you want it quiet back there, go back there your damn self and tell them to be quiet." It's my first AD. I had a bad night that night, so I was charging toward him, and Jane Wyman grabbed my arm. She looked at my face and she said, and so I went back to my director's chair, continued directing, okay? When we came back from lunch, she had fired that first AD.
And the second question coming from Julian out of Texas, he said, have you ever not received a role because of discrimination? Have you ever been discriminated against for a role, like something you get it because you're black?
Well, that's something you never know. I mean, you know you didn't get it, but there's no proof of why you didn't get it. But there are, you're aware after a certain point, that you know, things don't happen for you in the same way sometimes in those days. And you endure it and you tolerate it and you know, a friend of mine taught me a long time ago in terms of anger, you can't play checkers in a chess game. If you're in a chess game, play chess. So you choose your battles. Sometimes you lose a battle to win the war, you know what I'm saying? You can't win every battle. But lose one battle, win the next one.
All right. Next.
I'm sorry, I'm in 120 countries and everybody's starting to ask questions. For the gentleman, the other author, they said from Japan, I can't pronounce the name, sorry. Have you ever been accused of being a culture vulture? Culture vulture.
Have I ever been accused of being a culture vulture? As a matter of fact, I have, often. And now that I have a YouTube channel, I hope you guys can all watch it and subscribe to it. It's called Unique Access Entertainment. I'd say about 85% of the comments are very positive, and the people that don't know who I am that watch it are always like, man, who is this guy? He knows a lot about rap. And man, how do you get these big interviews? And then a couple people say they don't like how I talk or how I look, and then there's the other people that call me a culture vulture, or one person called me a colonizer. There's all kinds of things that people say that are, you know, unfortunate, but, you know, that comes with the territory, and I know that I'm not. I know that I got into all this because I love rap. That was my pure motivation to try to get into this career. It was purely because I love rap, and that's always been what's driven me in my career. So, you know, you're going to have people that dislike you or hate on you or whatever in general. So that's just comes with the territory, unfortunately. Next question.
Okay, this question is for you, Bill. You know, I have admired you for many years, and we've been in the same situation, partying together over the years, and I've watched you maneuver, and I sat back and I took notes. So I really, really want to read your book to really get the full impact. I know some of it, but to really get the full impact of what all you went through, because being a woman and trying to be in this business, you know, we have it really hard. And the things that people put upon us to do is just unquestionable and just doesn't make any sense at all. Due to the fact that I've been on my own since I was 14 years old, I can't identify with a lot in you. And like I said, I have admired you from afar, even though we've partied together, and I finally got enough nerve to come and ask you for help. And you really, you have turned my life around so much till you don't even have the remotest clue of what you've done for me. And I, like I said, I really appreciate that, and my girls appreciate it. And like I said, I want to learn from you. And thank you again for Ryan.
Well, God bless you. Thank you. You know, I think, you know, sometimes when people have success, they unfortunately get amnesia. You know, it's for whites, it's amnesia. For blacks, it's blamnesia. And, you know, we forget that the people that reached back and helped us, and somehow we get a little snooty and snotty and whatever it is. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Because somebody helped you up at one point, you know? Why don't you reach back and help somebody else? But I guess you think your hand's gonna get dirty. Well, somebody's hand got dirty helping you. But I don't understand that attitude. People throwing phones in their people's... or talking down to people as though they're not as good as them. I don't get it. But I'm just simply saying, I try to give back because I hope you give back, because I know you're going to be successful more than you are already. And as long as you help other people, that's the only way we're going to grow. Not just keeping our own and doing our own thing, but giving back, particularly to our kids these days. I'm very nervous about what's happening in schools, man. They're graduating, and you're going to think I'm exaggerating, of course, but I'm not. There are children graduating from high school in this country today with second-grade reading skills. How do you compete in a global economy with a second-grade reading skill?
You don't. You don't.
It's called prison.
All right. Any other questions? Or I don't. Oh,
So I'm up here.
up top.
Yes, I have one from Blue from St. Paul, Minnesota. This is for you, sir. He says, ask you, what do you think of the current state of gangsta rap now that we have World Star and the focus is on living the lyrics opposed to speaking on issues? And he said, by the current stage, I mean drill rap out of Chicago.
Well, I think the unfortunate reality is that since gangsta rap, when Schoolie D created gangsta rap in, 85, maybe a little earlier, the reality is what he was talking about is what was going on in society. And he was talking about guns, drugs, violence, economic segregation, lack of educational equality, all these disparities that happen in the United States, particularly what white people get versus what the disproportionate discrimination that blacks get by comparison. And unfortunately, all those things remain true today. So sadly, what Schoolie D, Ice-T, Eazy-E, NWA, et cetera, rapped about back in the day in the 80s is still happening today. I think with the acting out the lyrics, that's also something that's been happening, unfortunately, since the beginning of rap. Just Ice, who's not very well known to the average person, but he was a gangster rapper from New York. He got arrested for murder. C Murder has been arrested for murder. A lot of the artists, unfortunately, part of the reason they write about what they write about is because they live the lifestyle. So, I mean, this is something that has happened and continues happening. I think the immediacy of, like what Bill was saying, with the cameras and cell phones and different things, brings a different dimension to it because now it's instant. Before, it was a rumor that somebody beat somebody up or somebody was in this gang or somebody sold this many drugs, and now the immediacy of it, I think, brings a different dimension. And because people want to get attention and they tend to want to get it for negative reasons, instead of, I would argue, back in the day, there was more thought put into the videos, for instance. The videos would tell a story or it'd be shot like a feature film for a music video, whereas now you're just holding up a phone and throwing up your set and dancing or whatever you're doing, and that's not, I would argue, I would say that that's not artistically as demanding, shall we say. And because of that, you have the proliferation of that type of video, that type of environment, and it's only accelerated over time. So. All right, we got another question. All right, so the question is, do I consider what we're listening today hip-hop or just rap? And for me, that's a very tricky question because a lot of people always will argue to me that, well, rap was always conscious, or rap always stood for this, or rap was always political or whatever, and it wasn't. That's very inaccurate. The first raps were about the DJ, were about the party, were about looking good. It was braggadocio, it was fun. The political element didn't come in until years later. So the people that represent the roots of rap are representing the roots that happened later. They're not the original roots of what the music, the culture, and everything stood for. The artists and everyone that I've talked to, everything I've read, and the people that I've hung out with that helped create the culture were doing everything to get away from that. They started b-boying, they started doing graffiti, they started rapping, they started DJing to try to escape what was going on in New York because of the deplorable conditions in the Bronx and elsewhere where the music and the culture originated. So they were trying to escape it. That's why they didn't rap about the stuff that was going on. One surprising example is Kool Keith. He said, why I rap about space and doing all this stuff, because where I was living, I didn't want to rap about murder because I saw murder. I didn't want to rap about people doing drugs or selling drugs because I saw that walking in my projects. Dana Dane was the same thing. He and I have talked about that 100 times. He was like, I'm gonna write a song like Nightmares or Cinderella because I wanna be rich. I wanna get out of this. So as it directly relates to your question, I think rap, hip hop has the four main components: DJing, b-boying, graffiti, and rapping. But then people confuse the fact of rap is just someone rapping. So anyone who raps is a rapper. And if you rap, that by default is under hip hop culture. People may not like it, they may think it's terrible, they may think it's whack, but since the 70s, people have thought people that rapped were whack that were in the culture. When Kumo D dissed Busy B and ended his career, people thought Busy B was whack. But earlier that day, Busy B was a part of the culture and he was great and he was amazing and he was rocking the party. He was the chief rocker Busy B. That night, he was whack and over. But that's not fair because he represented what he... Yeah, but the thing is, he was now not deemed cool because Kumo D dissed him. So to me, it's all rap, You might not like it. So rap is a part of hip hop. So hip hop to me, I never call the music hip hop because you're dealing with a quarter of the culture. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't separate itself. That's my opinion. All right. Any questions?
Any more questions?
We got one?
So besides meditation, what are some other things that you do to continue to stay positive, knowing that, as an actor yourself, you have to face being rejected over and over again sometimes? So besides meditation, what are some other ways what things do you do to stay positive?
This gentleman with the camera right there and I have put together something called the Duke Media Foundation. And we teach young people, high school kids, two things. One, media literacy. You want to get into this business, how has it changed? It's not the film and television business anymore. It's media. You have, as I said before, augmented reality, virtual reality, cell phone apps, the internet, social media, etc. How do you leverage that to your benefit? And the next thing we teach is financial literacy, the distinction between the spending of a dollar and the use of a dollar. What is the stock market? What is debt? What is credit? What is all of those things? Are all those things because a lot of poor people are never told the distinction between the use of money and the spending of money. And Karen Clark, who's a VP of our City National Bank, comes in and teaches that. And so, again, in giving back, and as Carl can tell you, seeing the difference in those kids between the time they come in and the 12 or 10 weeks after when they leave, you cannot express the good feeling that you get from seeing that you're passing something on to the future. And what we ask them to do is, okay, you pass that on to other kids in the future. Just don't forget. Just keep going.
Each one, teach one. There you go. All right. Yes, ma'am.
It's not really a question, it's more of a statement. First, I just want to say I'm totally honored to be here tonight, just to be in your presence. I've admired you for years, and I grew up in Louisiana, and my mom and I used to watch everything that you did. But I never knew that I would end up in California as an actress, so I'm a part of the show with Queen, and just sitting here looking at you right now, I was going to bypass this opportunity not to say anything, but then I said, why do that? I'm here. But growing up, my mom and I used to watch you, but I was always captivated by your eyes because I felt like your eyes told the story without you saying anything. And it's like once you came on camera and you made contact, even me, then I never knew I'd be an actress, but I would sit there and I remember one night my mom said, why are you looking at that man like that? And I couldn't explain it to her, but it's something inside, and I said, it's something about what he's doing. I said, he doesn't have to say anything. He just walks on the screen and something's about to happen. And I studied you forever, without even telling anybody. I watch your movements. Even, I'm a woman, but still, I learned so much just by watching you, and I had to tell you that. I couldn't let that pass tonight. And just to be in the room with you, it's like an aura that you give off. That's amazing. And to hear you say, tell people about giving back and not mind getting your hands dirty or just being a part of something with somebody else. Everybody needs to hear that, and it needs to be sprinkled around to everyone, because some of us, well, I'm going to say all of us, at some point in time, you do need help. You need somebody to open up their heart and take a chance on you. And I've had people take chances on me, and I never ever forget. I might move on, but I don't forget. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for being the person that you've been over the years to me.
Well, God bless you for that. God bless you. Thank you for that. God bless you. Thank you.
I read a little bit of the book. I know you've had an excellent career. You've gone through a lot. I know as far as your family, the importance of your mother and your father and your sister is really matter. What I don't hear a lot about is your family, currently. I believe you have a daughter, and my husband and I, we have a nonprofit foundation for children and families. And I just wanted to ask you the most important question. What's going on with you and your family, and the importance of your mother and your father instilling the roles most important to you? How has it spilled over into your current family, your daughter, and the family vision you have? How do you maintain a great family?
Well, she's actually my goddaughter, and I know since she was 3 years old, and her mother and I are still friends. She's sitting right there, but it's like, daughters. I had a phrase, and she gets mad at me when I say it to her today, but from the time she was 3 till now, I say books, no boys. And books, no boys. But I always taught her, and I think she uses it today. I said, men treat you the way they see you treat yourself. And that you have to treat yourself in a respectful way, because you're giving them instructions. And so I think she listens to me, but I think there's a responsibility that we have, and doesn't always agree with what I have to say, listens and sometimes doesn't hear me, but it's our responsibility to state our true feelings, because this is not the kindest world in the world. This is like you have to give them whatever protection and information you can give them, but then Like you say, that stove is hot. Look at the scars on my hand. She said, thank you. Psh. But, you know, it's like you do what you can do. And I think that's the responsibility of parenting, that you're not popular. My father and mother used to tell my sister and I, if you want a friend, get a dog. I'm not your buddy. I'm your parent.
All right. Any other questions before? Oh, up top, we got some more.
I'm not crying, it's the dust up here, it's my allergies. If I'm over here bawling, somebody set millions up here. I just want to share something. I've known Bill for a while. And Bill, when I lost all my friends, I was dying in the hospital. I had feeding tubes. I was fighting for my life. And it's like when you're a millionaire, you got a whole entourage of people. And when you fall off, there's nobody. But I met Bill during Dark Rose. He was helping cast the book. And nobody knew I was sick. And Bill said, hey, Queen, how are you doing? And I just don't know why that opened up, so I said, I'm actually in the hospital. Bill stopped everything he was doing, and he came and sat with me in the hospital. All the nurses were going crazy. I thought it was hilarious. All the nurses were like, oh my God. And I'm sitting here, and I feel like she said, you can't believe it. I'm like, Bill Duke is sitting at the foot of my hospital bed. And I was able to call Bill and talk to him about all my problems, the binge drinking, the anxiety. I was 32 years old, 33 years old on 30 medications. Bill introduced me to meditation. Because of that meditation and what he has taught me, and him being a genuine human being and a genuine friend, today I'm off all 30 medications. I'm not a binge drinker. I'm back to being a successful entrepreneur, businesswoman. I only take vitamins. And when people question meditation and friendship and a genuine human being, there's no question about it. It speaks for itself. And I no longer have feeding tubes and have to be cut open from chest to waist because I have my sanity whenever I'm stressed out or I'm anxious. I meditate. My twin and I meditate together, and it's truly saved my life. And Bill, I want to say, you have truly saved my life. And I thank you for that. And that's why I drove almost 2 hours to see you. We will always support what you do.
Thank you so much, my dear. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless you for being who you are today and going through what you went through and where you've come to today. So God bless you.
Including climbing up here being a great idea.
How'd you get up there? I'm trying to figure out. There's no stairs. How'd you? You helped her? A ladder. Oh.
Levitation.
You levitated. Whoa. That's deep.
All right, everybody. If there's no more questions, we'll wrap it up here. All right.
The books are.
Yeah. Rick, the books. Rick Ross. Where is Rick Ross?
Yes, sir.
They're asking about the books. People would like.
On top of the gelato machine.
All right, everybody. Head to the gelato machine, and Bill and I will sign your books. And we appreciate you guys coming out. Thank you very much.
God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.